The rain poured mercilessly over the dimly lit street as a frail little girl, soaked to her bones, clung desperately to a stranger's coat, her tiny voice breaking through the cold night. "Please, sir. I don't have any money now, but please save my mom. I'll pay you later, I swear." Her tearful plea shattered the silence, drawing the attention of the man she had approached, a renowned doctor known more for his wealth than his mercy. Little did she know, another pair of eyes had frozen on her from the car parked nearby. A man who hadn't believed in fate for years, until that very moment. Emma was only 10 years old, but life had forced her to grow up faster than most kids. Since her father passed away 2 years ago in a factory accident, Emma and her mother, Sarah, had lived on the razor's edge of poverty. Sarah worked long hours as a waitress, doing everything she could to shield her daughter from the hunger, the unpaid bills, and the bitter loneliness of an empty fridge. But sometimes, life strikes faster than love can protect. One cold evening, as Emma sat by the window waiting for her mother, the clock kept ticking later and later. When the door finally creaked open, it wasn't the usual tired but smiling face that greeted her. Her mother collapsed right there on the floor, her breathing shallow, her skin pale. Emma's heart exploded with panic. She had no one else. No relatives, no neighbors she could trust, and no phone to call for help. Grabbing her small worn-out shoes and her tattered coat, she ran into the stormy night, her little legs numb from the cold but her mind burning with fear. She reached the nearest hospital, a place she had passed 100 times but never dared enter. The glass doors loomed over her like a castle gate, cold and unwelcoming. When she ran inside, doctors and nurses brushed past her, faces locked in their busy routines. Finally, she spotted a tall man stepping out of his office, Dr. Robert Hale, one of the city's top surgeons, known for saving lives but only if you could afford his price. Emma rushed to him, clutching at his coat, her voice trembling. "Please, doctor, my mom's dying. I don't have any money, but I promise, I'll pay you. I'll do anything. Please don't let her die." For a second, Robert looked down at her, another street kid, another unpaid job. He started to shake his head, but just then, a voice called out from behind. "Wait." It came from a man who had been standing near the hospital's glass doors, paralyzed in place since Emma had walked in. His name was Ethan Cole, a billionaire, investor, and philanthropist, though some whispered he'd lost his heart the day his wife and daughter were killed in a car crash years ago. But as he looked at Emma, something strange stirred in his chest. Her face, her eyes, they mirrored the same determination, the same innocent desperation he'd seen in his own daughter's eyes before the accident. His world, once hollow and gray, cracked at the sight of this little girl. Ethan approached the girl and the doctor. Without a second thought, he pulled out his wallet and handed the doctor his black card. "Do whatever it takes. I'll cover it." Emma blinked at the stranger, confused but too overwhelmed to question the miracle. The doctors rushed to her home with Ethan, where Sarah lay unconscious, her body fighting a severe case of pneumonia and cardiac strain from years of untreated health issues. For hours, Emma sat on the cold hospital bench, her small hands tightly gripping the edges of her coat, her mind spinning in silent prayer. She didn't know the rich man's name, but in her heart, she had already started calling him the angel. As Sarah lay in the ICU, Ethan stayed near Emma, offering her food and warmth. Slowly, bits of conversation unraveled between them. Emma talked about her mom, her late father, her dreams of one day becoming a nurse, and her promise that she would pay for the treatment, even if it took her whole life. But Ethan couldn't shake the haunting familiarity of her face. That night, as he stared at her sleeping on the hospital couch, the memory finally surfaced. Years ago, before his own family tragedy, he had sponsored a scholarship program for children in underprivileged neighborhoods. Sarah, Emma's mother, had been one of those recipients. Her photo sat buried in an old folder in his office, bright, hopeful, and full of gratitude. Life had come full circle. The woman whose future he had once tried to save had unknowingly raised the child who, even in poverty, showed more strength and grace than most adults he knew. Sarah's condition slowly stabilized over the following week. When she finally woke up, her first words were, "Where's Emma?" The mother's love was so fierce, even in her weakened state, that it brought Ethan to tears, the first real tears he'd shed in years. When Sarah learned what Emma had done, and who had saved her, her heart broke with gratitude and humility. She tried to refuse Ethan's offers of financial help, but he wouldn't hear of it. "This isn't charity," Ethan told her, kneeling beside her bed. "It's returning a favor that started long ago. You've raised a girl with a heart far richer than any of us." Months later, Emma stood proudly in her new school uniform, her mother beside her, both healthy and safe. Ethan had paid off their debts, set up Sarah with a new job, and created a trust fund for Emma's education. But the best gift he gave them wasn't money. It was the reminder that kindness, once planted, always finds a way to return, even if it takes years or crosses paths in ways no one could predict. And for Emma, the promise she'd made that rainy night wasn't forgotten. Years later, when she became a nurse, her first paycheck went to charity, for another child like her, who one day might be standing in the rain, hoping someone would listen. Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the deepest courage. And sometimes, the kindness you give today, will save your own heart tomorrow.